Cimoooooooo! What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you my competitive tier list for the December 2019 format. Now for this month, we don't have a lot of tournaments coming up, but maybe if you still have a regional coming up that you're still trying to get your invite for the World Championship qualifier, you're definitely going to want to know how the tier list is being structured and know what decks are seeing the most representation on the power scale. But if you are on the west coast of the United States, we do have Pro Play Tour Las Vegas coming up on December 15th. It's awesome because there's a Konami sanctioned regional on the 14th, so you get two events in one weekend. It's similar to how we did Pro Play Tour Columbus, but that's awesome. It's at the same venue on the same weekend. It's a $2,000 cash prize pool event, only 20 bucks to enter. Your invite gets you into the $10,000 cash prize pool invitational taking place in January, and I'll of course be there doing live stream commentary coverage. So links are in the description if you want to pre-register, and I hope to see you guys there. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into the tier list. So here we are. We've got the 5 tiers: Tier 0, Tier 1, Tier 2 Rogue, and everything else. We're going to go ahead and just get right into it, just starting with Altergeist. Now, Altergeist I'm going to go ahead and put in the Tier 2 category. It's a deck that's able to see competitive play. It's able to garner some tops, and actually over the course of the last month, it's been doing rather well. It's actually been able to top almost every single major competitive event, apart from, I think, one over the course of November, so that's pretty good. Altergeist is a pretty solid option. Again, I wouldn't expect going into any tournament to play a ton of Altergeist, but there's a pretty high likelihood that you might play against one at the very least, and that might even be towards the later stages of the tournament, so definitely be on the lookout and prepare yourself for Altergeist. Next up, we got Cyber Dragon. Cyber Dragon, I'm actually going to go ahead and put in the Rogue tier, as a matter of fact. Now, Cyber Dragon, it's not that Cyber Dragon has been doing poorly. It was able to get a top 32 appearance at YCS Pasadena, and I think it's been bubbling some more major events here and there, but Cyber Dragon is nowhere near as powerful as it used to be, especially when it was able to take advantage of the Orcas engine. It still can, it's just not nearly as good without Mermaid anymore. It's still a pretty decent deck. It's got some good going first and going second plays, but in terms of representation, remember, that's how this list is being structured. You're not going to be seeing nearly as much Cyber Dragon as you used to. It's still possible that one might sneak its way into a top cut, but definitely just, you know, be mindful, but I wouldn't worry about it too much, but it definitely could make somewhat of an appearance. Next up is Infernoid. Infernoid's going into the Rogue tier. Infernoid was actually doing pretty well for the earlier stages of this format from the latest ban list that we had. It's pretty good having a deck that's entirely comprised of DD Crows in a super heavy graveyard reliant format, especially now we're at the point where DD Crow is seeing main deck play by a majority of players. But again, Infernoid isn't without its weaknesses, and I think that's what's really holding it back. However, do bear in mind that this deck has managed to make multiple top cut appearances, but I think in terms of overall representation, yes, its conversion is okay, but I don't think you're going to see a lot of them in the field whatsoever, but be mindful that there are going to be some people messing around with this deck. Next up is Madolche. I'm throwing Madolche in the Rogue tier as well. Madolche is a deck that, you know, it's actually won a regional, I think, and it's managed to get like a top cut at, you know, Pro Play Tour Dallas that we just had recently. It's an interesting going second deck, and going first, what's very fascinating is that Glass Souffle is a quick play like DD Crow for 2, but it shuffles the cards back into the deck rather than banishing them. So it's like, that's pretty interesting in this graveyard reliant meta, and especially because it can just make a crazy turn 1 board. It's very, very susceptible to hand traps, and that's why I'm hesitant to put it anywhere else. But honestly, I think this deck has like a little bit of legs, but I don't think it's anything too crazy. Like I said, it might pop up here or there, but nothing really to worry about. Heroes, same thing, going in the Rogue tier. Heroes are still good. You can main deck Super Poly, which is actually a bane of a lot of the top decks' existence, and it actually just naturally synergizes with the rest of your deck. You've got Dark Law, which is incredible against graveyard reliant strategies as well, but again, it just doesn't really have the representation. It's been able to get like bubble appearances at YCSs so many times over, but it just hasn't been able to like crack that top cut. It's so close. I think it like topped in YCS Guadalajara like months ago, but really hasn't done a whole lot since, other than like bubbling so many times. Again, people love Heroes, but don't expect too much of it. Just be mindful that there might be a couple people playing it. Now we have Guru Control. I'm putting Guru Control in tier 2. It's actually on a bit of a downturn. Guru Control hasn't really been seeing too much play as of late, but the deck is still very strong for what it is. Pretty solid control deck, lots of floodgates, not really much more to say. It's just another very strong deck that kind of is going to mesh with a lot of the control decks at tier 2. Speaking of which, here we go. True Draco, tier 2. Honestly, True Draco is probably towards the higher end of tier 2, so I'm going to kind of slide it up here. True Draco just got second place at YCS Milan, so that's pretty cool. And honestly, the deck is still incredible for what it's worth. It does a lot of really good things well, and it's kind of just been like the budget warriors like dream for the past 2-3 years now. Just overall solid deck. It's fundamentally sound. It's very linear in its play style, but it does have a lot of, you know, inner workings that make it a very solid contender, and that's why it always manages to like top events. I cannot explain it, but Draco will like always manage to top events. It's so crazy, and yeah, that's why it's in tier 2. Next up, we have Mech Knight Invoked and kind of pure Mech Knight meshed together. I'm putting that in the everything else category. I mean, you could kind of put this like in Rogue because like Mech Knight Invoked and pure Mech Knight is still kind of like making an appearance every once in a while. I think one like bubbled YCS Milan, so that's cool, but like I kind of am tempted to just like not really even put it in Rogue because it's like so far removed. Like if you're playing against someone playing this deck, they're probably like one of 3 people in the room playing it. So like that's why it's like kind of like teetering on the edge of not even like being Rogue because it's just that far removed. But I mean, I guess we'll just put it there. It'll just be at the very far end. Okay, so you see Mobilize Engage here, but the thing is when it comes to this, there's also Sky Striker Ray. This is actually going to be representing Sky Striker Orcas. I didn't have the ability to like mesh 2 of these pictures together to make one, so Engage is going to be representing Sky Striker Orcas, and frankly, this is probably going to be the strongest deck of the format until we get the next ban list. This deck, if you have not seen it yet, is insane. Remember how like just throwing Sky Striker cards like in everything just seemed to do well? Well, I guess that still holds true for Orcas because it unlocks so much more potential that the deck really didn't have previously, and the deck's kind of frightening. I mean, it's not like completely unbeatable by any stretch of the imagination, but the power that this deck has now that you've incorporated the Sky Striker cards into it, yeah, it's a bit frightening. And I put Engage on there because it's kind of like the common thread between the two, and a lot of people are saying Engage should be banned on this next list. I'm kind of leaning towards that. You guys can let me know down in the comments, but man, yeah, Sky Striker Orcas. Next up is Magical Musketeers. I'm gonna put this in Rogue, but I want to put it at the highest possible area that Rogue can be in, simply because it just got another top at YCS Milan. Magical Musketeer is kind of like with Draco, where it's like been able to make like a top cut slot of the last like 6 premier events, and it's interesting because it's like it doesn't have a lot of representation, but in terms of like its actual conversion into top cut, like it's rather impressive, and it's an interesting going second deck. At the very least, what I would say is study up on your Magical Musketeer cards, because like even though not a lot of people are playing this deck, the fact that it's been able to like top the last 6 events tells me that like that's actually rather impressive, and you should actually know what this deck does and know how to combat it. Otherwise, they could just completely blow you out. Next up is Pendulum. I'm putting Pendulum in tier 2, but I think like towards like the top end of tier 2. Pendulum, honestly, it's like kind of teetering on tier 1. I think if I had like a tier 1.5 maybe in there, but Pendulum been doing absolutely incredible as of late. I mean, it's been able to get top cut slots just left and right. The deck is fundamentally sound. It just has a lot of really good things going for it. I actually think with Sky Striker Orcas becoming more popular, I think this deck gets a little bit better because then Master Endymion has like more targets to be able to negate, and I think that actually just kind of bodes better for the deck. So maybe with this kind of going on the rise, Pendulum's also going to go on the rise. We'll have to see. I mean, I don't know if we're going to go back to the days of maining Secret Village, but who knows, right? But definitely like top of tier 2 for sure. Next up is Pure Orcas, definitely tier 1 without a doubt. This was like the best deck before this deck came along, and yeah, I mean, just taking Orcas and throwing Sky Striker cards into it is insane, but Pure Orcas still honestly probably has higher representation, but I don't think that's going to last very long, because I think Sky Striker Orcas is going to soon take over once people start to realize just how powerful Sky Striker Orcas is. But Pure Orcas has its advantages as well. There are some disadvantages, like being able to play around Nibiru better that Pure Orcas has that Sky Striker Orcas actually suffers from. So there are some, like, you know, there's a balancing act for sure, and definitely be sure you know these differences going into these key matchups. Maju, I want to put Maju, I'm kind of like tempted to put it in tier 2, but I think we're going to move it back down to Rogue. It kind of just had this flash in the pan type of effect. It was doing super well, and now it really hasn't done a whole lot. It's still being played, but not nearly to the degree that it was before. I think a lot of people have just kind of like caught on and have really just kind of understood more well how the deck works. So I'm kind of tempted to just put it in the Rogue tier. It's still a fine deck. It's kind of just like all in on Maju, but for the most part, it's not really seeing tons of play. And remember, I'm kind of sorting this list by representation as well as power. So like, I think that in terms of representation, you can't really put Maju much higher than Rogue because not a lot of people are playing it, even though the deck is a lot of fun. Salmon Great, easy tier 1, like not even close. This deck probably has like the second, if not third highest representation after Orcas. Very, very good deck. I mean, it can make Abyss Dweller, so that's pretty good. And it's just a very solid deck past turn 1. It has its weakness to Nibiru, but besides that, like the deck is like just really strong all around. And I don't really expect to see much happen until we get the ban list. It's going to stay there for a while. Pure Sky Striker, we're going to put it tier 1 as well. A lot of people are still on this deck, and for good reason, because the deck really is still perfectly fine. A lot of people are adapting their side decks, playing stuff like evenly matched in the side deck, or even just stuff just to be able to help blow out that matchup in particular. But just keep in mind, this is Pure Sky Striker and this is Sky Striker Orcas. That's why those are both on there, just to clarify. Thunder Dragon. Thunder Dragon's going at tier 1, but hesitantly, because Thunder Dragon's been in a bit of a decline. However, again, remember, this is based off representation. There's still a lot of people playing Pure Thunder Dragon, and honestly, I think Pure Thunder Dragon gets a little bit better if Sky Striker Orcas starts to take off, because Colossus kind of helps counteract the search power of this deck in particular. Also, because we have plenty of other search power amongst these decks, but it's kind of like the bottom of tier 1 because Dingirsu, Orcas just slaughters Thunder. Like, it's really, really tough for Thunder to win this matchup because Dingirsu is just so good, but it's still really well played and well represented, so it's definitely going to still be in tier 1. Lunalight Orcas, I'm going to put in tier 2. Lunalight Orcas is, funny enough, it's an Orcas variant, not in tier 1, but it's a bit of an iffy one because it's a bit glass cannon-ish. However, this deck has a crazy high ceiling and can do some really incredible things. But in terms of like its representation and its conversion into top cut, hasn't been doing the best. People are still playing it for sure, and it definitely compared like to these other decks, a lot more people are playing Lunalight Orcas. However, I'm just hesitant to put it into tier 1 because I definitely don't think it's nearly as represented as these other 5 decks here. I think I'd like maybe slot it in like around in the middle somewhere over here. Maybe if I was like actually arranging these like how they should be, something like this, but a little bit hard to tell. And then lastly, we've got Dino, kind of bringing up the rear here in Rogue. I guess I'd put it like above Mech Knight because it's doing a little bit better than that. But Dinosaur, it is what it is. You're going to see one of these make top cut or bubble like every single YCS because there's a lot of hardcore Dinosaur players. And the cards are really good. It just doesn't really manage to do consistently well. There's not a lot of people playing it. So again, you might see one towards the top tiers of competitive play, but maybe not so all the time as you would any of these top 5 decks here. So guys, that's going to go ahead and wrap up this video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about any other decks I might have forgotten or what other strategies you might feel should have been rearranged on my tier list. I really love to hear your thoughts. That's what I love about the tier list. It's kind of fun that it's all subjective and we all have our own different opinions, but hopefully this helps you guys out if you're planning on attending any major tournaments coming up. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video helpful, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member, because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.